Hey, good morning. This is Matt Mangriotis with Cambium Networks. We're going to talk today about CBRS again. We're going to have continued webinar updates as things progress with this exciting stuff. Things are kind of getting there hot and heavy now. We got a lot of folks that have engaged and are performing in CBRS today, and a lot more that are interested and have held off for various reasons. So let's, without further ado, get into it a little bit. If I can advance the slides here, it's going to be a short presentation, and we can take questions certainly at the end. Feel free to type questions into the question box in the GoToWebinar interface, and I'll answer them as we go. For the purpose of CBRS, Cambium Networks right now has a solution that consists of the 450 platform of products. All of the 450 devices are certified under what we call Part 96 or CBRS capabilities. They all have grants. We are working towards getting the updated grant for the CPE, CBSD, which is another facet of things that's happening as well. But right now they all have grants, and we're able to operate as a system today under the CBRS rules. The flagship part of this port platform is the CN Medusa product, which is shown on this slide. It is really the leading edge technical capability of anything in this industry in the band, and capable of very high throughputs, very high capacities per sector. It's a 90-degree integrated sector. I'm sure most folks who are on the call already know this, but this device is performing extremely well, especially given the updated power levels which are allowed in the CBRS capable band. It's able to transmit up to 47 dBm EIRP in a 10 megahertz channel, and even higher than that in larger channel sizes. So we're doing really well with this, covering lots of ground and making lots of connections for our customers. There is a white paper online available that talks about all the features and things that go along with multi-user MIMO and the CN Medusa technology. I encourage you to read that. It's something that really benefits you to understand the operating parameters and the operation of and how this device actually gets that performance. The 450B in 3 gigahertz was recently released. I do want to talk about this a bit because it does provide additional link budget on the subscriber end. It's a very high gain antenna. It's actually 21, close to 22 in some areas of the band. Similar in form factor to the 5 gig, but actually providing a little bit longer range. We can get up to 29 dBm transmit power in some modulations. So we get to that maximum EIRP allowed in the CBRS band with this product as well. So you're getting really long range, great connections. We're getting great reports from those folks that have received this product already, and more of you are getting it as we get further down the road with shipping. We started shipping last month, and we've, I believe, fulfilled all the backlog we had from last month, and now we're getting more orders from the channel. So if you need these products, they are available now. So I won't bore you guys with this repeat slide, but this is kind of the summary of CBRS. I show this one every time I talk about CBRS because it's important to understanding the band and how it works. In the past, we had 50 megahertz, and this is really US centric. And I see some folks on the call that maybe are from outside the US and just keeping an eye on what's going on with the band and how things are changing. In the past, we had 50 megahertz available in the US under Part 90. That's that yellow bar on the left side there. Under CBRS, we've increased that by 100 megahertz of spectrum, but that comes with a tiered use structure, tiered use model. And that means that there are incumbents, namely the fixed Earth satellite stations and the Department of Defense radars, the Aegis class radars that are found on air carriers, that are incumbents and always granted access to the band wherever needed. Typically, these are in the low end of the band, with some exceptions, and along the coasts. Obviously, if it's on an aircraft carrier, it's not going to be in the middle of the United States. That said, they'll always get access to the band and kick everybody off if anyone is using anything nearby in a temporary fashion when those bands are detected. There are sensor networks throughout the coastal areas that determine this. It's known as an ESC, Environmental Sensing Capability Network. The SAS operators also operate ESC networks in some cases that help you navigate those waters. The next tier is the PALs. Those aren't in place yet, but auctions are coming, and I'll talk about those in a little more detail in a little bit. But PALs are priority licenses, and they will take priority over the general authorized access, which is kind of everybody else who wants to use the band. The PALs will be allocated up to 70 megahertz of the lower 100 megahertz, meaning the 355 to 365, up to 70 of those will be granted licenses in 10 megahertz chunks, 10 megahertz channels, in any county throughout the US. They will be auctioned off. There's a whole auction proceeding going on. It's auction 105. I'll talk about that in more detail as well. That's coming up later this summer. And then the rest of everybody can use the GAA spectrum to do what they need to do in CBRS. Very exciting stuff, and we are excited to get going on this. So again, we have the 450 platform that is ready to go with both federated and Google SaaS administrators. So you have your choice. When you log in and sign up for a CBRS service, you have your choice of which SaaS to use. Between those two, we are adding CommScope. We've recently re-engaged with CommScope. We're bringing them on board, and we're working towards getting them on board as well. It'll be a little while before we get them, but we will be able to support any of the major SaaS vendors with Cambium equipment. You are going through Cambium when you sign up for SaaS service through Cambium. It's actually CBRS services through Cambium, and we're paying the SaaS. So any charges that we have, we also included in that is the SaaS service. So there's no additional fees from any SaaS when you use Cambium equipment. You're paying Cambium directly. We're passing those costs on to the SaaS. You may notice that it's a little bit costlier than going direct to some of the SaaSes. That is because we're taking care of what they call the domain proxy and digital device certification that's required in this band, as well as providing the tools and facilitating things necessary to easily migrate from Part 90 to Part 96, as well as some additional tools to help things be able to be managed in a more graceful fashion. So again, 3 gig 450M is available. 3 gig 450B is available, and all of this is already granted under Part 96. We do have tools in place and that allow graceful migration from Part 90 to Part 96. Moving on, some folks say, hey, well, everything else I've ever heard about in CBRS is LTE-based equipment or 3GPP standard equipment. What makes 450 unique? Why would I use 450? There's a lot of reasons why. Most folks who have 450 in place today under Part 90 are looking for somewhere to take that equipment because there are deadlines approaching, which is kind of the title of this webinar. Those deadlines include this transition period where you must vacate and stop using Part 90. So if you're using a Part 90 network today, if it's 450, you have somewhere to go. It's easily migrated to Part 96. If it's not Cambium, if you're using, let's name a few, PureWave, Ubiquity, any WiMAX equipment, none of that stuff is certified under Part 96, and you will need to transition to something else. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. There is a deadline approaching. But in cases where you're comparing the performance of 450 against those available LTE solutions, we believe that 450 performs very favorably in terms of capacity and spectral efficiency. It's really unmatched, especially when you consider the Medusa technology and the massive multi-user MIMO that provides. So let's talk about how to get going. We've commenced commercial operations. Cambium Networks has launched what we're calling CBRS 1.0 as of a couple of weeks ago. And as of April 1st, we're commencing commercial operations, meaning that we are now going gangbusters. We have everybody who's migrated over operating under CBRS, and we're awaiting more folks coming over. If we're migrating, there's a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of manufacturers that have said that they are not going to support CBRS in 3 gigahertz. So make sure that if you're using something other than Cambium equipment, make sure that your manufacturer will support CBRS because there are a lot of cases where they cannot or will not support Part 96. Cambium does have a great solution for this and an easy method to migrate from Part 90 to Part 96. CPI training is probably the first step in getting going. And CPI stands for Certified Professional Installer, and that's required in CBRS. Any outdoor CPE that's installed must be certified by a trained professional, a CPI trained and certified professional. There's a WISPA webinar that was given about, I think it's about 4 months ago now, but it has good pertinent information about CPI specifically. It's free to watch, and I encourage you, if you've not had any training at all in this area, go ahead and watch that webinar first. Then there are the certification courses. They do cost money to do. I think they're all on sale right now, given the circumstances around. But all the major SaaS operators have their own CPI installer certification training. It's not, if you choose to do one with a specific vendor, it does not mean you're tied to that vendor. Like for instance, you could use the Google training, the CPI training, you can do the Google training and then utilize the federated SaaS in operation. It's not tied one for one in any way. That CPI training is kind of good for the whole band, no matter who you're using as your SaaS. So I've listed the federated, Google, and CommScope courses there. All of this stuff will be posted online, so you'll have access and be able to click on links and stuff through the slides that are posted. So more resources to help you with this. We have a whole microsite, if you will, cambiumnetworks.com/CBRS, talks about all kinds of stuff CBRS related, most of the basic information that I presented. It's got an FAQ, which we can add to as necessary, and links to other info. It's really a good starting place for all things CBRS if you need it. We have the details around CBRS 1.0 and how we've launched that and what it takes to get going on that. There's a forum post specifically about the announcement for that and some questions and answers in there as well. And then there's a webinar that goes through some detail by example, kind of a hands-on activity that we did a couple of weeks ago with onboarding radios. And that has not changed very much since then. This is an evolving process, so things are changing rather rapidly as we discover new things. But that is a very recent webinar talking about how to actually get the mechanics of getting devices onboarded and some of the tools around that, including that spreadsheet tool that makes things a lot easier. Deadlines. So the main kind of gist of this webinar, why are we doing this now? And I know this particular one's not as heavily attended as some in the past, because most folks that have heard about it are actually dipping their toes in and working on it now. So those guys probably are familiar with some of these deadlines, but I do want to point out a couple of key dates. As I mentioned, we started commercial operations April 1st. There was some notice a couple of weeks ago on March 23rd, I believe, that the transition waiver has been granted for those folks in Part 90. So that means that everyone whose Part 90 license expired on April 17th is now allowed to continue operating under Part 90 until October 17th, should they choose. This is good news for those that felt crushing pressure of transition and really were getting worried about making this transition for all their radios on time, which is only a week away or so. But it's kind of not great news for everyone in that by foregoing Part 96 or not transitioning, you're not able to take advantage of the lower 100 megahertz of spectrum. You're not able to take advantage of the higher power allowed in the band. And so I would still encourage you, Cambium is ready to go. So for all those folks using Cambium devices, this is your opportunity to establish yourself in the Part 96 band. While there's no, in the rules, there is no first mover advantage, because if new customers want to choose to use it, they can come in. But as you get going in that band, the attractiveness of newcomers trying to get spectrum in the band is less so once they see that the whole band is being used. I think it's a very similar story to the unlicensed area in that regard. So in any case, I would still encourage folks to consider transition earlier rather than later, and get going in Part 96 as they can. This does provide a bit of relief to the pressure, but it also creates a little bit more complication in that the SASs are not aware of Part 90 operations in the band. So they're not taking that into account when giving grants and things like that. So the sooner folks get out of Part 90, the better off the whole system will operate, because the SAS will be aware of everything that's operating in the band. So that's my 2 cents on this transition waiver that has taken place. So PALs. PAL auctions were scheduled in June, now July. It has moved by about a month due to the COVID crisis. Same with the short form applications, or the initial statement of intent, basically. Those are due now May 7th, and the window opens April 23rd to submit those. So if you're interested in auctions in your area for PALs, you need to have that short form completed and turned in by May 7th. There is a minimum bid that's out there that for every county that listed, there's a minimum bid, and that's based on a megahertz pop, basically a population times 2 cents. And that's the minimum initial payment or upfront payments. They're due in June, and that's 1 cent per megahertz pop. So that you get some pretty clear guidelines on what you're going to need to prepare for in terms of participation in this auction. It is highly recommended, however, to involve a lawyer who's familiar with this, and that's just my personal opinion. If you're going to get involved in this, unless you're very familiar with the rules and how these things work, I would involve a lawyer who knows. There may be some tips and tricks they can help provide you with. That's about all I had in terms of updated timelines and deadlines of what's upcoming. We're hard at work making sure things are running smoothly, and we're finding things every day. We're uncovering things, we're making sure things are running well, and trying to support our customer base as best we can. I know there's been some instability in how things are working, and it's a bit of a learning curve on both our parts as well as the SAS administrators. We're uncovering different things with them. Fixed wireless in general, fixed wireless is the first large scale, if you will. And when I say large scale, I mean tens of thousands of devices rather than, a carrier says large scale, they mean millions of UEs that roam around. But we're talking about tens of thousands of devices that are operating in CBRS. We are the first. Fixed wireless folks are the first guys to do this. So we're the pioneers, and there will be a little bit of growing pains, I will warn you. But we are working through those as we uncover them. So we're doing our best to support it, and hopefully we're doing what's needed. So if you need anything else, you can contact me directly, matt@cambiumnetworks.com, by email, or you can go to the forums and just click that join the CBRS conversation. That'll take you to the CBRS forum, and go from there. I do see a couple of questions. Let me see if I can pull them up. So is there a way? So I think the question is, if I'm a customer that has grandfathered wireless protection zones in place, meaning I filed for protection under Part 90, and those protection zones are really blocking the 50 megahertz of spectrum in my area that I want to use it. Is there a way to ungrandfather them or erase those zones? The only thing I have heard of in that regard is you're actually almost protected against yourself in those cases, meaning you can't deploy a new radio in that 50 megahertz in that same area because you're under a protection zone. So the SASs automatically block out that area for anyone, even you. It's kind of a dumb rule, but that's how it works today. And the only way I've heard to get around this is to kind of expire your license under Part 90. So if you're ready to move everything to Part 96, I believe you can go to the FCC and voluntarily revoke your license or expire your license and say, I want to kill this thing completely, which will get rid of your NN license. And I think I've heard that may work. I can't confirm that. I've never heard of anyone actually doing it and getting it done successfully. But that's what Richard Bernhardt mentioned that on the last webinar I was on with him, that you may be able to do that. That's the only way around it. Otherwise, you need to wait now until October 17th. That's another kind of pitfall of that extension that's been granted. Those grandfather wireless protection zones are in effect until October 17th now, not April 17th. So whereas it would have freed up in April, now you got to wait till October. One other note on that is, yes, the Part 90 is allowed to continue. However, the FCC is no longer approving SM deployments, meaning under Part 90, you are supposed to register every SM location with the ULS, with the FCC. And a lot of folks weren't doing that, but those that were following the rules. But they are no longer approving new sites. So you cannot legally put out new SM locations under Part 90. Even though the rules and your license is still going, they're not approving new sites. So another reason to get on the Part 96 bandwagon as well. That was all contained in that waiver notice. I think that's about it in terms of questions. If there's none others, I'm going to wrap this up. Nick, I'll contact you directly. Anything else, please feel free again to email me or post on the forums. That's probably your best bet in terms of how to get some response. Thank you for joining. We will post this recording as well as the slides on the forum. And thanks again.